Hello everyone and welcome. I'm happy to announce the sixth session of our discussion series on universal approaches in local circumstances and that puts forward the policy and practice gaps of urban conservation in different contexts and in different cities. Our events are organized at the chair of urban management in BTU Cottbus with the cooperation of the DFG Research Training Group 1913, also at BTU. And our events are supported by the German Research Foundation, DFG. And I'm very pleased to draw your attention to today's discussion about which reflects on 4 decades of urban renovation and regeneration policy and practice in Iranian historic cities. Our dear guests are Professor Ali Madanipour. He is a professor of urban design and planning at Newcastle University. And he is the author of Tehran, The Making of a Metropolis, a classic on urban development of Tehran, and several other works that have been published or have been translated in Farsi and many other languages, but Professor Madanipour has influenced the Iranian academic and professional and also official areas of urban conservation through his publications that are widely translated to Farsi, and also his the academic supervision of influential figures, such as our today's guests, Dr. Mohammad Saeid Izadi. And welcome, Professor Madanipour. Our second guest is Dr. Mohammad Saeid Izadi. He is an assistant professor of urban regeneration and conservation at Bu-Ali University in Hamadan, Iran. He wrote his doctoral dissertation on regeneration issues in Iran at Newcastle under the supervision of Professor Madanipour. He had many key positions in Iran in the official realm of urban regeneration. Among his key positions, I can mention he was the Deputy Minister of Urban Regeneration between 2013 and 2017, and Deputy Minister of Architecture and Urban Planning between 2017 and 2019 at the Ministry of Roads and Urban Development in Iran. Our third guest is Dr. Mahshid Saeidzadeh. She's also an assistant professor of urban design at Bu-Ali University in Hamadan in Iran. She also wrote her dissertation at Newcastle University on the city transformation and change in the historic cities of Iran. Her research expertise include urban regeneration, the revitalization of historic cities, and the adaptive reuse of historic buildings in the historic cities of Iran. I'm very excited for today's discussion, and Dr. Izadi, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do you want to start?
Yes, please, Dr. Saeid.
Thank you so much for introducing our situation. I think we prefer to started by Professor Madanipour. If Dr. Madanipour started, we follow their talks and discussion.
Thank you very much. You're very kind. Thank you very much, Dr. Yadollahi, for the kind introduction. Thank you. Well, this topic of urban regeneration and renovation in Iran is obviously the most able to talk about it is Dr. Izadi and Dr. Saeid because they are directly involved. What I can start as just a few words of introduction is the distinction between these concepts in the British context, in the Western context. Well, the words mean different things in different countries. In the British context, we have the concept of urban redevelopment. And earlier, the word urban renewal. These were the words that were used often in the context of the post-war massive modernist transformation of cities, where the old places from the 19th century, the dilapidated areas and working class areas, and also areas damaged by the war, were cleared and built on anew, all of these tower blocks and mass housing schemes. So that was redevelopment, urban redevelopment and urban renewal. Then we have urban conservation, which is historically, obviously, there's been interest and attention to preservation and conservation of single buildings of significance. And then it starts to expand into conserving and looking after textures of cities, parts of cities, districts that are historic and valuable to keep and to look after and to rejuvenate. So the idea is to keep the fabric, but revive it with new activities. And it's a more American use of the term to say adaptive reuse, which is in the British context, people talk about urban conservation, or basically something that is a legacy of the past. You reuse it, you give it new life with new activities, but be increasingly at an urban scale rather than just a building scale. Then we have also urban regeneration, which is something that came to be used more often from the 1980s. And that is dealing with the legacy of industrial decline, the process of deindustrialization that started earlier in the 1970s, perhaps, and then massively leading to the decline of large parts of industrial areas, because there was change in the global economy and some industries declined, and there was vast areas of dilapidation and decline. So the idea was to regenerate these areas, and the regeneration was not necessarily sensitivity to the texture and to the fabric, although there were interesting historical elements in it. And the idea was to integrate that into the new activity. So the spaces could be redeveloped, could be completely renovated with new buildings, new roads, but also keeping elements of the past. And the driving force of regeneration was often economic consideration, to bring new economic life to areas of the city, because industrial activity was the foundation of urban economy, and that had gone away. And so the search was for finding a new economic base for the urban economy. And regeneration played a significant part in rethinking the urban economy in new ways, which, as we know, was largely based on consumerism, largely based on globalization and entertainment and tourism and all of these things that you know about. So whatever happens from the 1980s, there's the word regeneration is widely used for bringing back to life parts of cities that had declined as a result of deindustrialization. And this happens, you can see it around Europe as well, in large parts, for example, in the German industrial heartland in North Rhine-Westphalia, or you can see it in other countries. And sometimes it's just the whole urban district, sometimes it's just single buildings, single significant buildings. So it varies in scale. So this is the context of what you see. And also the historic cities versus the periphery is a big debate in Europe, that you see how historic city creates sensitivities, cultural identity, how you deal with it, but also the actual growth of the city and a lot of social problems of the city happen on the periphery, where in continental Europe, you see the periphery is the key issue that people deal with. So I just had this general background of these terms and ask Dr. Izadi to take us back to Iran.
Dr. Izadi, yes.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Professor Madanipour. As Professor Madanipour said, there is two different areas of policy in Western Europe and North America, which one is the conservation policy and the other urban renewal, that in the last decade they name it urban regeneration. In this talk, we are talking about these two areas of policy in Iran, which we review the different policy that became to implementation in these a few years ago.
And what's this?
Therefore, if you agree, Dr. Saeid review this PowerPoint that show these all you have my sound or voice, or yep, okay. Therefore, if you agree, we can start it with the review of the policy and practice in Iran, which Dr. Saeid can talk about it. Dr. Saeid.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. So let me just open my speaker to hear you guys. So I hope this voice and picture are both fine for everybody. And as you said, we are going to talk about the last 4 decades. It's not just the recent trends towards the urban regeneration, because we need to know how we get here and why is it so different from the urban regeneration. I mean, the beginning and initiation of this regeneration in Iran is in a somehow different reason and different way. And mostly we're talking about the historic areas of the city and the urban regeneration, which has started in these areas. So we are going to talk these 5 different topics First of all, just a very short summary about the historic areas of Iranian cities. And when we are talking about the urban regeneration of historic areas, what do we mean? And what kind of features they have, these areas in difference with the rest of the city, Iranian city, in contemporary situations. So, and then we are going to have a short review of urban rehabilitation and renovation policy in Iran, mostly after the revolution. Not because there was no attention to the historic areas before the revolution, but mostly because what happened is concentrated, the majority of projects are started after 1980s. And then we are going to talk about the beginning of the initiation of urban regeneration in Iran and what happened in those 4 decades that caused, that made us to lead to this point that urban regeneration is the best solution actually for our historical areas maybe. So, and then we're going to see some of the projects in this field since 1994 that urban regeneration is the main policy of dealing with these areas, and then some concluding points at the end. So the historic areas of Iranian cities are actually are very old. When we are saying historical, it means although they do not look like what they were 100 years ago, and they're totally different now, but they had some features, you know, that we need to pay attention to these features. And most importantly, these are what we almost remained since then. Even these photos are more than 15, 20 years now. I hope some of them are still there, although the photos are not brand new. But this density that you see had, as I said, no matter if it was in the north of Iran or in the desert areas of Yazd or in Langarud or in Hamadan, they were all had some features which were connection of the main structure of the city and the bazaar to the trade routes, and because of the connection of these cities with the neighbor settlements, that we are not going to explain that as it's not the main subject of our discussion, but just to show you and your guests that how interconnected were all these organic alleys and all these backbones of the city with the public areas and connection to the city gates. And what happened then after 1930s, that it's the subject of a different issue, but that's when the problems started to raise and caused nowadays a necessity to deal with these fabrics in such a huge amount of with such a huge amount of problems that we are dealing with, which is almost totally different from so many parts of the world when you look at them, because of this ad hoc and almost overnight modernizations that happened with these road constructions, and the changes that it caused in all, not just the open spaces and the mass and space were all been affected, and the morphology has started to change, and by itself it has brought, by these changes brought a lot of changes in socially and physically and economically to the city. As you see just this sheet of a few images from different cities since then, which has started from this first Pahlavi era road constructions in Isfahan or other cities, and most famously in Mashhad, as we see in 1930s, 40s, and then 50s and 60s, and these large clearance of urban fabric, which Mashhad case is the most famous one. And they led to the change and actually erasing some of the most, all of these road constructions like this obviously led to the deconstruction and the demolition of so many valuable heritage, architectural heritage. And then they brought so many migrants to these larger cities later on, as I will show in the next slides, that what happened to the Iranian city afterwards, after these modernizations in a very short time. And we had, with these migrations, we had informal settlements and we had social housing in these new areas, and even with constructions after the war. Later on, a few decades later, that we see in Nawab, or what was the subject of your talk last night as Bain al-Haramain, as you see here. And so all of these changes caused beautiful urban fabrics like this one that we see in 1921 in Tehran. The same area almost after 100 years turned to a fabric like this, which is so sad for everybody. And we need to do something about this huge amount of density and pollution and so many other urban problems that caused with these huge changes. So in 4 decades, from 1980 to 2020, the country's population increased from 36 million to 85 million. So despite all the controls in urban population increase, but you see it's almost more, about 3-fold, 2.5-fold increase of population. And most importantly, they were all urbanized. The rate of urbanization also increased from 52% in 1980 to 79% in 22. So these changes led to an uncontrollable urban sprawl for the government following the increasing migration to larger cities, which brought a lot of informal settlements for the cities and also high ecological pressure on urban areas due to the overuse of natural resources. As you see these days, most importantly about water and so many other resources. So challenges of the urban development system that we are facing now, if we want to look at it in 2 different aspects of urban challenges and architectural challenges, they all made our cities less and less livable, and they decreased the quality of life in these cities. So urban poverty is the main issue that we are dealing in our urban regeneration projects at the moment, and polarization of the cities and the spread of social harms and environmental crisis and low resilience of cities against disasters, inefficiency of transportation system, most importantly, and disregard for the values of the past as well, that we'll go through and see why they are like that. So in the second part, after all these problems as an introduction, we're going to have a look at the main periods of rehabilitation and renovation policy in Iran. As you see, after the revolution and by the beginning of war in 1980, there is this 11-year period that we had only rehabilitation and nothing more could be done because of the problems of war and the lack of resources. So we were just cleaning the streets and just rehabilitating some facades, and nothing more could be done except a very few, because of the very few resources that which was available for the country, and the whole oil revenue was going to the war. And later in 1991, by the end of the war and the beginning of the construction era, so the first 4 years there was some projects called cultural historical axis, محور فرهنگی تاریخی, which was achieved for 5 different cities at that time, like the one which was proposed for Hamadan that you see here, and the most famous ones for, I will show you later, for Isfahan and Shiraz, which were done by Mr. Mir Miran at that time. And many of the changes that we see in Shiraz after that around Zandiye is the result of that project. But then, but it didn't continue for the rest of historical cities. It was made just for these 5 cities. And then from 1995, this amalgamation of plots started, the projects that we call Tarhay Tajmi. And we'll see about that. And from 98 to 2005, we had some development and revitalization programs. Until 2014, that the urban regeneration concept introduced to urban authorities, we had renewal and reconstruction of dilapidated areas, both the Farsude, which brought a lot of issues and discussions and debates among the experts in Iran, using the word Farsude for these areas that, as we will see, and then from 2014 that we are dealing with urban regeneration. As I said, from 1980 to 91, as you see in these pictures from Jamalle in Isfahan, we just had this cleaning and just making them a bit more livable, you know, nothing behind these walls, you couldn't see much done, but very few buildings could be restored and repaired, like an old bath in this area, which turned into a library for children, a Kanun Parvarish. And also after that, as I said, we had Tarhoy Mehfar Farhangi Tarikhi, cultural heritage. This one for Isfahan or for Shiraz, as you see. They were just trying to define the conceptual framework to deal with historical areas of the city in relation to the rest of the town where it was possible. So this is something that I think at the end, if it's necessary, Dr. Izadi can explain a bit more about those projects. But when we started to have amalgamation of small plots after that, it was actually the beginning of the disaster, we can say. So with the increase of oil revenue, the government came to this conclusion that they can buy people's houses.
Deputy of Housing.
Deputy of Housing.
Change the role of the urban development deputy in the ministry to the Deputy of Housing.
Yeah.
Building the housing.
Yeah, and then so as you see, these plans shows how different was the attitude of different architects and different contractors to these projects. Some of them, like the consultant who was dealing with Mashhad, had totally changed the morphology of this really, really ancient historic wall. It's more than 1,200 years old fabric. And they totally changed the fabric, just relying on the oil revenue to be able to buy people's houses and change them like this. And some of them were trying to deal with it, like Ilchi Khan in Yaz. It's a different project done by a different consultant who was trying to respect the previous morphologies. So this amalgamation caused the increase of density in, although the plots were not as small as the past and they were amalgamated, but the density of construction increased, and the new morphology was totally different from what it was in the historical areas in the past. So you can see what happened after that era in Tehran, in Nawab, or in Bain al-Haramain in Shiraz. There was just clearance of urban fabric, just the disappearance of all these old small plots, and replacing them with, as you know, and you saw last night in Dr. Lutfi's talk, how it was replaced by a huge mall now, a commercial area, which has no use for the people, and every time you go there, there's almost nobody's there. So, and it happened, I mean, it began before the revolution, actually, with, as you saw again last night, with Shiraz in Shah Cheragh, these clearances and changing the size of the land and using them for different urban projects. So, as I said again, the most famous one is the experience of Mashhad, as you see. But what we are facing actually now, as we are dealing with a project at the moment in this area, we see that if we are dealing with more than 35 hectares of underground areas at the moment, within the last 4 decades in this part of the city, in the city center of Mashhad, although it wasn't the best thing to do, erasing all these areas and replacing them with just some courtyards for the religious purposes. But the fact is that it started with that ring, which started in 1930s, and then clearing all the urban fabric between this ring. And so it was a huge area for the urban authorities after the revolution to deal with it, and they couldn't build inside. So they just make it more and more courtyards to show the authoritarian power of Stambots, the authorities of this holy shrine. So we can say that all of these projects that we reviewed in those decades are, they had some common features, and most importantly, we can talk about the fact that they were mostly concentrated in historic areas of cities, because they were the most problematic areas of the cities, obviously. And except for a very limited number of these plans and programs, they are mainly planned, designed, funded, and implemented by the central government. So as I said, the oil revenue was the main motivation for them to make bigger and more invasive interventions, or being more conservative in different eras, so different periods. So the main framework of the plans was based on physical programs. We before 1998, and I'll say why 1918 is important. Before that time, we were mostly concentrated on physical programs. There were not any social approaches, empowerment, I don't know anything about participation. None of them were still very common among experts. They were all dealing with physical programs, and they have been largely dependent on government resources and public revenues, as I said. There was a lack of centralized organization or structure for policy making until then. When they were supposed to deal with these historical areas, because Iran Cultural Heritage Organization was just dealing with monuments, historical monuments in ancient places. So we didn't have any organization for policy making, for planning, and for management of these programs on a national, regional, and local scale. But in 98, and that's why we are dividing this from 98 onward. In 98, the Ministry of Housing actually established UDRO, Urban Development and Revitalization Organization. And this was the new deputy of the minister for dealing with for dealing with dysfunctional areas of the cities, and most importantly, the historical parts, and also informal settlements and some other parts. So development and revitalization started since then in historical areas with some different attitude. At the beginning, obviously, it was still quite development oriented rather than conservation oriented, as you see in Kohne Square in Isfahan, or in Zandiye complex in Shiraz, or in Qom. And then after that, with the earthquake of Bam, since 2005, we started to, I mean, a new concept was introduced to dealing with this dysfunctional areas of the city, which is called Bafte Farsude. These dilapidated areas needed some renewal, mostly because they were not safe at all, and reconstruction. So what they decided was that, first of all, defining which areas of each city is really in a desperate need of renovation because of the safety issue mostly. So they had some criteria that you may have heard. These criteria are about instability, impermeability, and fine-grained plots. So any urban block in the town with minimum 50% structurally unstable buildings was considered as an unstable block, and urban blocks with minimum 50% alleys under 6 meter width, which quite a lot of them you can find a lot of these narrow alleys in our historical areas. They were considered as impermeable, and any urban block with minimum 50% plots under 200 square meter area was considered a fine-grained plot, and it needed to be amalgamated. So the reason that they started to define these areas in the town, in each city, is actually to get help from owners themselves by giving them mortgages, low interest mortgages, to be able, any person whose house was in these blocks, they could actually get mortgages which interest was 8% instead of 24% for the purpose of renovation. And that's why it brought a lot of conflicts and contradictions. Some neighbors wanted to renew their houses in these old areas, and the other neighbor on the other side of the street could use the low interest mortgage. This person couldn't use. So, and using the word farsude or dilapidated for these areas again. So it brought so many discussions to change these criteria or review that all over again, but they are still actually in action, and there are still the criteria for the people who lives in these areas. So as you see in all these decades before the introduction of urban regeneration, we see that unlike the West, that you may see, why I can't get rid of this, I don't know, I'm sure you all can see that. So we had two different trends in the West. Some people from, like Ruskin and Morris from the beginning, who were from 19th century, were true believers of pure preservation. And in the opposite side, we had people who from the beginning, like Haussmann, were into urban reconstruction and large scale interventions in the city and redevelopments, comprehensive redevelopments. But the history of West shows that these two different trends get closer and closer during the time to reach to an integrated approach towards the historical areas of the city. So we're not going through all of these different evolutionary periods in the West by both schools of thought. But what happened in Iran is the authorities, I mean, the school of thought who was actually in favor of redevelopment and large-scale renovations, little by little, they tried to get closer to conservation-led regeneration in historical areas. But on the other hand, the cultural heritage organization people who from the beginning were supporters of pure preservation ideas, and they didn't change that much. As I remember that Dr. Lutfi mentioned that last night as well, when he said that even Miras at the moment, I mean, cultural heritage organization in Shiraz, for example, he was talking at the moment, they are still against any kind of urban regeneration concept, and they even have problems with the word itself. You know, there's no way that they can accept that regeneration is not just development, and it can be respectful to conservation, as we can see at the moment and we will see in next projects. And it was just disconnected there, and very few efforts has been done by them so far in this way. So that's why we faced a huge amount of need for a new approach, because we were losing our historical urban areas, fabrics quite fast. And that's why we found that we need some new principles and programs in the concept of urban regeneration. So urban regeneration actually, as Western people says too, and it came the same, we actually the same concept was adopted here by the urban authorities at the time. They thought that it's something to define a strategic, integrated, long-term, flexible and contextual framework. So paying attention to context instead of just specific projects was actually introducing to to the urban authority, to the urban management for the first time. And they were trying a simultaneous development and protection of clear, specific, and achievable operational goals, trying a macro scale sustainable development goal in urban areas to micro scale urban spaces. With the maximum participation of all actors and stakeholders. So as you see that we make it in the red color, the participation of all actors and stakeholders were almost, it was in the literature of our national thinkers, but it wasn't among the urban managers and urban authorities before then. So all these words came to the literature of urban authorities little by little, as we'll see, so that ultimately prevent and solve urban problems to a sustainable economic, physical, social, and environmental lead. So as you see in all these different projects that we'll go through some of them, the role of people became more and more important. And so the necessity of changing the paradigms of urban planning and architecture in degraded areas made us to define some goals. And the main goals of urban regeneration in Iran were reducing urban poverty, as I said at the beginning, with an approach toward empowering the residents of target areas and preventing the reproduction of poverty, because poverty was reproducing itself on and on again with those limited projects in each area, and it couldn't be done like that anymore. So promoting urban resilience also is very important, and equipping cities for facing disasters. Promoting spatial identity and place dignity while protecting the values, and realization of urban governance in order to revive and promote the social cohesion of residents. Sorry? So as you see in this diagram, actually, there were some key actions in urban regeneration programs of Iran. So if you can look at this triangle, it has in each corner, they are the main areas of attention in these urban regeneration programs. These programs were focusing on these three issues: housing improvement, as I said in, for example, which was started in Baft Farsude. In some other ways, it has continued by the introduction of urban regeneration policies. And then urban space improvement as a very important motivation for attracting investors to these areas. Infrastructure improvement, because infrastructures in these areas was quite dilapidated and out of order in so many places. So they all needed some improvement. But the main purpose, as you see at the middle of this triangle, is empowering of people who live there to continue living there and to be able to renovate if their houses needs strengthening or renovation or rehabilitation. So to do this, we were dealing with these three issues. We needed to do some network building with it's not just the central government anymore in these areas. We need to make some new trends for attracting investors and new trends among the residents themselves for a sense of attachment to these areas, increase those sense of attachment, some sense of belonging, and some institutionalization of these networks and factors and stakeholders who were there. And to do that, we needed to make institution building, now Sazi, or capacity building, Zarfiyat Sazi, and also Abzar Sazi, with the financial and legal facilities mostly to make these programs achievable in these areas. So urban regeneration approaches and policies can be summarized in these few, that they are all the supporter and facilitator. They all pay attention to the supporter and facilitator role of the government. So the government is not like 1980s and 90s, the sole spender of all these funds for these projects, the provider of all the resources. They are just they have the facilitator role, and they just support them when it is needed. So the pivotal role of urban management, but the urban management is a very important role. And these approaches try to be a neighborhood based and at the same time have a citywide approach. It doesn't mean that they look these historical urban areas as segregated and isolated islands in the city. They try to see them in connection with the rest of the city. And they need to be demand driven. All these urban regeneration projects are defined based on the demands that urban authorities in each city or the citizens actually want authorities to intervene and deal with those areas. And all of these programs need to pay attention to the context. Most importantly, public participation is very important for all of them. Obviously, they are not as successful as they should be yet, but at least it has entered and introduced to the literature of urban authorities at the moment and policymakers. So they are trying to avoid top-down approaches, but how successful they are, that's another story. And they all have an emphasis on the internal and sustainable development of local communities. So local communities is something that if we have time, I can tell you later in different projects how they are playing a role at the moment in these urban regeneration projects. And all of these urban regeneration projects try to define programs based on the priority of neighborhoods and target areas. As I said, they prioritize the programs, and they avoid interventions that lead to the disintegration of the social, economic, and physical context of the target areas. That's what they put as their goal, you know, and hopefully they can achieve that. So stakeholders and actors of urban regeneration in Iran, as you see, we have these three powers of executive, legislative, and judiciary in Iran. Each of them has a role in urban regeneration. For example, judiciary, we have different parts in our judiciary system, like the investigation organization of the country, or administrative justice, or prevention administration, prevention of crime, and especially judiciary, because of the informal settlements, they have a very important role in helping. This is something also something that Dr. Izadi can explain more if it's needed. And legislative as well, by the parliament, different laws which are needed to actually achieve all of these plans and programs. And executive force, which is the government, obviously. And government with all these ministries, many of them, not just the Ministry of Housing, yeah, more than 21 of them, the Ministry of Housing and Interior Affairs and Cultural Heritage, which is the ministry now, and even cultural guidance, or Ministry of Energy and Education and Health. All of them has a role in these dilapidated areas, dysfunctional areas, and they can prepare, they can help participate in providing the resources and also other help. So on the other hand, the executive force, which is the government, need to be in close relation with private sector and municipalities for the purpose of achieving these urban regeneration projects. And obviously the final destination is the satisfaction of people who live in these areas. So all of these forces, like NGOs and the different factors by people, for example, these are things people are dealing with, are participating, like surveillance. The people who live in these areas are the main surveyors of this actions, and also it's their demands that shows how shows the way actually to urban authorities in these projects. And private sector, as you know, like investors and designers and the builders, all of them, banks, and also developers that we separated from them, from municipalities, private sector, and government, because it's not as advanced as it should be compared to the developers of the West, but they are at the very beginning of their appearance in our urban regeneration projects. So policies of urban regeneration programs are mostly empowering and organizing the informal settlements. They can be divided in these three, and improvement of historical areas and renovation of dilapidated urban fabrics, as I said. So there are some necessities, some policy, and some strategies to deal with that. The necessity to solve the current issues of neighborhoods and residents and preventing the growth and reproduction of target areas. Because as I said, the poverty was becoming more and more, and the target areas were becoming more and more to deal with. So they need to predict which areas are going to be dysfunctional in no time and prevent that. And also they need to plan for comprehensive physical and environmental actions, economic and social planning as well. And their strategy should be problem solving and policy making from national to local level, and cooperation of all relevant institutions. So all of these aspects, as I said, with the help of some legislations that existed by then, by 2000, the national document in 2014, yeah, 2014. So the legislations were, as I listed them, and you can see them later. With all of these issues, it all led to providing a national document on revitalization, rehabilitation, and renovation of dysfunctional urban areas, Sanad Milli Bazafarini, which was approved by the parliament in 2014. It was something that actually, for the empowering of informal settlements, had been done before with the help of World Bank, and it gave a good lesson to Iranian authorities to provide something else, a similar one, going through the same process to make a national document for dealing with historical areas of Iran. It had thousands of hours of work by consultants, and produced thousands of pages of reports as the supporters which led to this national document. But as you will see, the document helped, that you see with the sign of the president at the time, it actually paved the road for later actions, not just by the Ministry of Housing, but also by all other institutions, organizations, stakeholders, as you will see. For example, after I give you a little bit more about this document and what it says, in city scale and also in neighborhood scale mostly, this document actually gives, it's like a torch for all people who want to work in these areas. That, for example, when it comes to the improvement of housing, or making capacities for active people who are active in these neighborhoods and areas, and in neighborhoods scale, and all of these programs for empowering, for social and economic empowering of these people, and different urban regeneration programs in public spaces. So with all these initiatives in this document, so the action began, and which had begun a few years before then, but with the approval of this document, it actually became more and more official. And so, as you see, the framework of urban regeneration deals with social and economical empowerment of residents, capacity building, providing financial and legal tools, and all around the country, mostly in informal settlements and also in historical areas. They try to help deal with this poverty by empowering people, increasing the employability among them, and teaching them new skills in different classes. So, and also, on the other hand, they were improving the urban infrastructure as well in these areas, public transport development, urban infrastructure development, and urban services. They were not just dealing with housing or urban spaces. They were making libraries, clinics, whatever, sport complexes, whatever these very, very deprived areas really needed for people to stay in these areas and to continue to live. They started to rehabilitate and facilitate public spaces like streets and squares, green areas, riversides, terminals, etc., as we will see in the projects. Renovation of multifunctional urban complexes started, development of and supply of structural urban services, restoration and revitalization of historical and heritage buildings. So, for example, these are some examples of the urban services that they provide in these deprived cities, or building new ones. And also, when I say that approval of this national document actually was a torch and was paving the way for other organizations and institutions to know how to deal with historical areas of the city. Unfortunately, I didn't translate this one, but I can explain it to you. In the left side, you see the different aspects which are focusing by this national document, as I said, for the purpose of a balanced renovation in this dysfunctional urban fabrics. Most importantly, they need some supportive actions, and they need the urban regeneration of dysfunctional areas of the city through some renovation of houses, or, for example, supplying proper infrastructures, or improving the public spaces, or improving the social and economical situation of residents. And now, in the latest report prepared by the Renovation Organization of Tehran Municipality, who is the main organization dealing with Bafta Farsude, with dilapidated areas, actually. They got the same concepts here. They're doing the same, and they changed their attitude from just renovating houses to paying attention to the improvement of public space, and also urban regeneration of dysfunctional areas which are not residential, something that they were not dealing with in the past. And also, for example, this is one of their projects, not the government. This is done by municipality, and so many projects that in this recent report you can see hundreds of projects in all around Tehran actually have been planned and prepared, and some of them has been started to execute for the purpose of urban regeneration, actually, which is not completely urban renovation or completely preservation and dealing with historic buildings. So if I want to review the executive measures, what has been achieved, the projects that has been implemented so far, we can divide them into these three groups. We can say they were public space improvement in pedestrian zones, squares and riversides. There was some reuse of old buildings within these urban regeneration programs as incentives and motivative projects in these historical areas. And also rehabilitation of historical neighborhoods. For example, pedestrianization of Tarbiyat, although it started long before the introduction of urban regeneration concept to urban authorities in Iran. But it is among the first examples of pedestrianization and street in historical areas of the city. And later, after 94, you see that in Rasht, it became more successful compared to what happened in Tarbiyat, and the area is way bigger than that area. So it's at the moment, despite all the despite all the oppositions at the beginning by shop owners and people who were not happy with not having motor vehicle access, but now, at the moment it's the most vital and viable part of the city somehow. And the same as you see in different events in the area, and also it continued in other cities like Bu-Ali Street in Hamadan, the oldest first Pahlavi era street of the city, and it's a square which is pedestrianized at the moment, and there's no car in it now. And making so many other projects all around the country in these historical areas to help actually improvement of the quality of life in these areas, as well as quality of physical aspects too. So all of these changes that you see in Jolfa, in Esfahan, or in Kashan, they help the tourism before the corona, obviously, and before the sanctions, but it's a kind of trend, it's a kind of movement that has started in provincial areas and different cities since then. And as you see, the number of projects that have been achieved are quite a lot. Although obviously because the country is very old and because of the problems that I said, there is still a lot of work to do. So another aspect, as I said, in urban regeneration projects is utilizing heritage buildings with new functions as stimulus projects for urban regeneration programs. Many of them has been repaired not by cultural heritage organization, but by different stakeholders, private sector, and also provincial offices of UDRO in different areas. And as you may heard, these are the reports that caused an Aga Khan Award for UDRO at the time for revitalizing these historic buildings in different cities of Iran. And some of them you see, in Esfahan and other cities, or for all around the country, even in the southern shores of Iran, in Persian Gulf, in Bandar Abbas, an area that which was added by some new buildings to an old entrance and making into an architecture faculty. And also and for the neighborhoods as well, it happened in several neighborhoods to help people not to leave their old neighborhoods and stay. And with this, all this conservation happened in these areas through urban regeneration projects, or Jolfa neighborhood, which is among the finest examples that we have now. Because I mean, some of these urban space improvements led to the restoration of several old buildings, historical buildings, and changing them into successful boutique hotels and cafes and restaurants. And at the moment, it's a very vital and viable, actually, old neighborhood in Iran. And also another example is Yazd in front of the Friday Mosque. And in Gorgan even, you see some of these urban fabrics that has been renovated. I mean, through urban regeneration projects came back to existence, came back to life actually, while they were losing their habitants every day. And at the moment, they are not as bad as before, and they are getting through their problems. Riverside regeneration, actually, we have some good examples as well of the achieved programs. In Maraghe, for example, as you see, the riverside has become a favorite place of people, but most successful project is in Sari, is in Tajan, that people actually love to spend time there, and travelers as well. It's a very alive area of the city actually at the moment, and so many different events and things are happening there. These are still Tajan in Sari with different new bridges and events that are going there all the time. And also in Ardebil, we have another project which is achieved and finished and turned to a very favorite place for the people. So our concluding points are these few. First of all, we need to know that conservation and development are two domains of policymaking, planning, and action for revitalization and regeneration of urban old area. Do you want to say that? That with the development of their approaches act as two complementary, not conflicting policy. The problem we always had so far is that cultural heritage organization authorities have always seen development as a conflicting policy to their policies in historical areas. But the fact is, just preserving these old monuments and for the purpose of selling tickets for visitors cannot keep them alive. And this is something that you saw in these projects, that they need to accept that they are not in conflict. They need to complement each other actually for the sake of success of these urban regeneration projects. And the fact is, despite the evolution of urban renewal policies and the introduction of urban regeneration policies, but very little changes has taken place in the field of conservation towards an integrated approach for dealing with problems of urban historic areas. The only actions that they took so far that can be summarized in these four, which was they accepted to approve the historical areas of 168 cities, and they actually accepted to approve just a 13-point resolution. It was 32 points, but they changed it into 13 point in 2017. And all these, in this resolution, there were some suggestions and instructions to deal with the historical area as a fabric, not just the monuments. And approval of revitalization law in 2019, and also establishing the Fund for Restoration and Operation of Historical Monuments, Sanduq Ihya, which has some historic buildings as their resources to actually help, with the help of private sector, they can revitalize them. Another point is that urban regeneration is a relatively new policy in Iran to solve urban issues, which is integrated to the principles of conservation in historical parts of the city, as I said. So it is necessary for the two of them, for urban regeneration and conservation, to have common and legal ties in all fields, including in their approaches, in their policy making, in their programs, and in their actions towards this project. So most importantly, we need at the moment to raise the public awareness and their knowledge. This is the most important element in the sustainability of the process of protecting historical context. They are still not as demanding as they should be from the urban authorities to preserve their areas. Very few people, mostly in younger generation, unfortunately, they feel attachment to these historical areas, and many of the Iranians are still prefer their individual actually benefits to the public benefits. As a stimulus for development, implementation of initiatives, projects, as I showed you some of them, by the government and municipalities, it can be a pattern to help create a flow by attracting a new trend in these areas to attract the attention of different stakeholders to a degraded area. So thank you very much for your attention, and I think Dr. Izadi, you want to say something, or we are here for any more discussions? Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saeid. I think now we are in the Q&A time, but before that, I wanted to ask Professor Madanipour a question. Maybe after that, we can open the discussion to the audience. The concepts like regeneration have been used like as bazafarini in the Iranian professional and also public like a community. So we talk about regeneration, but we have different understandings of it. And sometimes we can call, for example, real estate development of a project, like of a property, regeneration. Sometimes I have seen authorities in the heritage sector, they call, for example, restoration projects or adaptive reuse projects as regeneration. So it appears that in the Iranian professional and also academic community, there is a lack of common understanding of what regeneration is. And I wanted to ask you if you think it is a completely local issue to redefine urban regeneration in Iran, or there are certain criteria for calling an approach, a regeneration approach, or a project, an urban regeneration project.
Well, thank you. It's yes, it's I have sensed that there is, it's not entirely clear for people, and because it's a new initiative, relatively new, and because it's multidimensional and complex. So I've had discussions with people in municipalities that they are trying to find what it means for them in practice, and what should they do, and in what sense they relate the activities to this new policy. So yes, it's an unfolding process. It's a learning process, and as we see from very nice and comprehensive presentation by Dr. Saeid, it's come through all these twists and turns approaches to the urban fabric of the historic cities. So people have all sorts of different orientations, different priorities, and this package of ideas and this particular combination of urban regeneration, it doesn't matter what really people call it. Ultimately, it is a new package, it's a new approach. And as we see from these beautiful projects that were shown, that they've been successful in some parts and in some areas and for some subjects. Of course, it's very challenging because I've seen participation projects that have a lot of issues that they need to sort out in terms of the legal entitlement of people to be in a participation project and the like. So it's not straightforward. I've seen people's confusion about how to value and which period of history to value in these dealings. So some people you see, they think 17th century or 16th century areas are good, 19th century areas are not necessarily that good. So they delete the 19th century to get back to the 16th and 17th century. And this idea of palimpsest, this idea of layers of history that you can decide which layer is better than the other. All of these things are still there. But this idea of seeing development and conservation as not two opposite poles and trying to bring them together in a strategic approach is obviously something positive that we see here. In the problem, of course, is in historic areas, you see the problems of concentrations of poverty, the multiple occupation of these historic houses, the decline of the fabric and the loss of attention by people who can invest or use them. But at the same time, you see very encouraging signs of people returning to these areas and trying to revive them and improve them. So it's a mixed picture, but it's an improving picture as far as I can tell. The key problem is that real estate mindset that looks to things in terms of the property value and without any sensitivity to the historic and cultural value there. So that's where we see some loss of heritage, loss of quality, sacrifice for fairly short term, and aesthetically questionable results. But as I say, it's a big project. It's a big process going on in all sorts of different places. And it's got ups and downs depending on the availability of resources.
Thank you. So among the audience, and so I will just, Dr. Izadi, do you have a comment on Professor Madanipour's comments? Dr. Izadi, we cannot hear you. Please unmute yourself. Thank you.
Sorry. Just, I said I'm waiting for some question.
Yes, Farnaz
question.
Mohseni has a question. I unmute
sure.
her.
Sure.
Hi, everyone. Hi to all the speakers. Thank you for this wonderful presentation and your insight. I have specifically a question from Dr. Izadi, who has been really involved with the situation of urban regeneration in the context of Iran. I know the social aspect is included theoretically in the concept of urban regeneration, but every country has its limits, and when you want to implement it, in the case of Iran, it looks like that considering the regeneration is implemented in Iranian cities through a more centralized approach. Because it looks like that with changing of governments, the regeneration approaches loses its sustainability, let's say. So I wonder how you would evaluate the role of public participation or public involvement in the case of Iran, and considering the overall situation of Iran, what would be the solution to improve the role of public in regeneration plans? I cannot hear
Dr. Izadi, could you please mute yourself? Unmute yourself.
Okay. Okay. Finally, actually, this is the very long process to change the government that is centralized for decades to a new trend that want to involve people. We try from 2014, 2013 to change the approach of the government, but as you said, for reaching this new approach to cooperating with all bodies, all stakeholders, need to change many things in this centralized government that depended the resources of the oil, and everything is under the control of this government. We started to change these approaches through making the policy, the new policy and approach, by introducing urban regeneration policy. But this is a very long process, and we think that we need to time that to reach the aim and goal of this policy. I agree with you too that many of projects under the name of urban regeneration only changed their attitude toward conservation, but many of them still governed by the government, and many foundation that's ruled by the government. And we try to involve the people, but people not very agree with this policy and have many angize or many motivation to involve in this project. Therefore, I think this is a very long process that we have started, and the government must continue this new attitude. Unfortunately, the new government don't believe to this policy, and they change everything nowadays. And it's very sad news that I can talk about it. And they try to build 4 million houses in the country, again involving government to implementing a project or something like that. Maybe Dr. Saeid can explain more about this question.
And whatever they could do in previous government has been mostly spent for legislation, which I think is a very important thing. But at least we can be sure that it's there. If one day there is another manager to follow that, you know, some of the frameworks have been dealt with, at least some of the terminology, some of the main policies are there to follow. But we can just hope for the end of sanctions and the betterment of management and the economic situation, that people follow the intellectuals and all of these disciplines and concepts that have been introduced to authorities. For example, we had Setad Milli Bazafarini, which is a very important thing, I think, at that time. In each city, there was the committee that people from all different organizations, from cultural heritage organization to municipality to the ministry to different ministries, I mean, all infrastructures, everything. It was the Moderator Yek Parche. It's something which was a wish for a long time in Iran. And it was happening at that time in those 6 years that Dr. Izadi was in charge of these areas. So, and we attended some of them even at 11 p.m., you know, and there were really people who wanted to do something for the city and trying to harmonize their decisions together and not making the opposite decisions like the past. And being at least aware of what they are doing. It has a long story in Iranian cities that some institutions do something in these historical areas quite opposite to the decisions of another organization. And these committees were actually really good to prevent that. That's what we can explain so far.
Thank you, Dr. Saeid.
Is there any other questions that you can?
Tarane Yadollahi is here also. Welcome, Tarane. I ask you to unmute yourself, please.
Yeah.
I did unmute. Okay, good.
Hello.
Do you have me?
Yes.
Not
Yeah,
your,
good.
my Tarane,
First of
not
all-
your image, just your voice.
Really?
I also have your image.
Ah, yeah,
No,
I saw
I
the image too. Okay.
First of all, I want to thank so much this excellent presentation by Mahshid. It was really perfect, and it made me, it reminded me of all what we went through during the last 30 years together. And with Saeid also. And Saeid has been in these, when he was the deputy minister, actually, she didn't even name him, but it was him who did everything. So we really thank him a lot. And I really beg you to please, to come back to all what is the this process of raising this awareness, this public awareness towards the regeneration of the cities, and especially where it's historically more evaluated, let's say. And what I think is that we shouldn't actually lose our hope, let's say. What is first of all to be done, I think, is to make this awareness between, I mean, to spread it among the young architects and young urban planners and all the people who work in municipalities and here and there directly with these spaces that have to be regenerated. So if you two and other people who are good friends come into this social arena and try to really somehow talk about this more and more, why just talk about it in Vienna with our friends? It's also very, very important to have all these gatherings, let's say, in Iran and with people who are really concerned with regeneration and who really hope to do this. Like, I make you an example. Last 2 years, I put a little money I had with Mr. Ghanei in the let's say regeneration of this house in Isfahan, and we really enjoyed it. I mean, every step of it we really enjoyed. And at last they presented it also to competitions, etc. And it was really nice. And another thing is, like, so many people now with me who have this little group where you two are also members of. We are doing some things since last winter in Lalezar, trying to make people believe that this can come back to a nice street where people can go back to we have to redo somehow, because they're still there, the 18 cinemas that are there, and turn them into maybe different mixed use places where theaters can come in and cinemas can be revived, and where people can come and sit in cafes and things. And little by little, I think if everybody comes into this hopeful mainstream of hope, trying to you know, make believe that this is possible, this is absolutely necessary, not only possible, but it's for the, you know, for the identity of our cities. It's absolutely necessary that we restrict and that we go against all what's now coming into you know, it's bubbling up, all these not very good experts being at the head of the municipalities and working in them, and all the things they say, which seem so unreal, and it's not really, it's not, how do you say, not only, for example, what now Saeid said about the 4,000 houses they want to build in a year. It's impossible, and they're not going to do it. Of course, they're not going to do it. And it's not altogether. We have to go somehow back to all what in these years Saeid has been presenting as the good, the good governance and the good mainstream towards regeneration of cities. And for public awareness, we just have to write. it's not serious what these people are saying. And we don't have to take them as serious. We have to maybe work on the people who are actually working on the cities and on architecture and on rebuilding. And people, I mean, architects, they somehow have to come to this point to say no to people who want to put down houses, turn them, tear them down and rebuild malls and commercial centers. We have to tell them not to do it. And maybe after a while, when everybody is with a lot of course, we have to put our lives in it, but when they believe in it and everybody comes to this conclusion that it's better to keep the urban factor, the urban tissues of the old cities, if everybody comes to this conclusion that it's better to keep, so even the authorities, as you said in your presentation, will somehow lean to believe that this is the way. I think it's still, no, as Ali said just after your talk, it's not yet well established, this belief that it's better to keep the old and to turn it into something for today and a better thing, maybe. It's not yet rooted down into the heads of everyone, but it's possible that we do it if we work together on it, and if Saeid and you and everybody else, like for example now Solmaz is in our Lalezar group, and from far away Europe she helps us, you know. So it's possible that you people who live in Tehran also come and help. So not only in Lalezar, of course, but for all cities and everywhere. I make you a very good example of what we did last winter with people in Isfahan and the government here and the deputy minister, Mrs. Saeid. We went into this procedure of making a plan for a very bad proposal that was going on, and still the municipality of Isfahan is very meanly for it, and they don't say, okay, we give up. And they want to pass a 16-meter wide street at a distance of some 50 meters maybe, parallel to the Maidan, to the big piazza, and just passing very, very near to the cupola of Sheikh Lotfullah. And this is horrid what they think and what they want to do. So we went against this. We made a whole big movement against it. And I begged people in Isfahan, like Ghanei, like the head of the Miras, Mr. Montazer, and this friend I just went to meet after 9 months, some 2 weeks ago, Mr. Dr. Rafs Esfanjari, who teaches at the university, and we actually they paid also, and I worked from Tehran, and we gave out. How do you say, Davtalabane?
Voluntary.
Comment?
Voluntary activity.
Voluntary. We voluntarily, without a contract or without being paid, we put a project on the table, and it went to the Shoray Aliye Shahrsazi, and they somehow accepted it. And there was also another thing, but still, and also there were meetings in Isfahan, official ones at the municipality, where they somehow got aware that there should be this big no to that street passing there, and that it had to go back actually to what it was, the urban tissue there. So things happen when you say things loud, and when you work on it, it does happen that people somehow accept. And now lately, 2 weeks ago, I told you I was there. I talked to the new deputy of the mayor in Isfahan. I went and saw him and said, you have to do it. You're new, but you should know that this is important for the Aberu, for the face of the municipality and for the face of our country. If you do these kind of things, everything is going to be ruined. And it's really a shame. So he accepted. And the day after, I sent Mr. Panjari to go and see him, and they came to an accord, how do you say, to a agreement on the University of Isfahan being somehow at the head of what is going on all around the piazza and in the old urban fabric. So it's important that people say things aloud and do things aloud so that things change. And I really ask Mahshid Izadi and Saeid Izadi, my very dear friend, to come back to this fight, to this مبارزه چی میشه؟ To this struggle, exactly. That we should start or struggle for this. And if we don't, everything will fade out. So it's important that we do struggle. In this group we have, and I would love to have you people in it as an active member. It's 4.5 years almost, more than half, that we're doing these campaigns, and this struggle is going on. And it sometimes works, I tell you. For example, when they wanted to, in Tehran, do so many things, for example, I don't know, 300 hectares of military space going into construction for high rises and stuff. And we said no, and we really said a very big no. So what happened was they said, okay, we won't build. And the military, the army said, okay. The Artesh said, okay, we won't do it. So first, if it happens that people say no, it's so rare in Iran that campaigns, of course, there's Karzar where we sign every day on different things. But if this really happens, that people come into this mainstream of struggling against wrong things, maybe things will change. I really beg you all to come and help. Thank you.
Thank you, Taraneh, heritage and urban activist from Tehran, but she's active in different cities in Iran. She and her group. And the process of these like implementation, there are many economic and inter-organizational details that really influence what happens at the end and what the outcome.
To be honest, this is my question, actually. It has always been my concern that maybe Professor Madanipour can answer that what goes on there, Ali, that things like that never happens in details, you know? Everything seems so perfect. Is it just the general taste and the good education of architects, which is much better there? Is that why? That they do not see these disasters in their urban spaces?
Well, there are always huge controversies about projects. It's never settled. It's never it never satisfies everyone. So there's always different sides to any event and different views. There are some commonalities that emerge and become adopted by some sort of government guidance. But again, those are guidance points, not rules, but the idea, for example, that a conservation area needs very detailed monitoring of what happens in there is set. So you can designate an area as a conservation area and regulate what happens within it and be very sensitive to that. But at the same time, a lot of the times there are not enough resources to monitor and make sure that it happens. So, and also people may not like to be so constrained about changing their windows or doors or whatever. So you have all of these tensions that on the one hand, there are some pressures for regulation and control and sensitivity to details, sensitivity to material and all that. But sometimes people come, and a lot of architects do that, to come argue for novelty and innovation and not just repeating the past and argue for something new that establishes a new relation to the past. So all of these things are going on, and all the time there are opposite sides of everything. So it ultimately comes down to the decision-making authority in the municipality, and they have to be responsible for it. But it happens. I mean, just look at the past 10, 20 years, the skyline of London has changed beyond recognition. And it's just the dominance of these big towers now, big international banks building them. And this was completely against anything that the European city had in its way of approaching historic areas. So, and a lot of people are absolutely unhappy about this rise of towers taking over the skyline of the city. They're campaigning against it, and it gets nowhere. So it's not nice and tidy and without any problems. It's full of problems and controversies. But at least there is some common understanding about the value of historic heritage that has spread, because it's embraced in the culture somehow, and particularly a culture like the UK that is generally sensitive and backward looking in a way, conservative.
Yeah, sure, thanks. So is there any other questions, Solmaz?
No, not so far. I think, yeah, we answered all the questions. You answered all the questions.
Sorry.
And yeah, yes, so at the end, I would like to thank you all, Professor Madanipour, Dr. Izadi, Dr. Saeid, for the very informative discussion. And yes, but maybe now, yes, of course, we can close the meetings. It was very informative for me because my project is also on the same topic. Thank you for your input, and thank you all the audience. So if you don't have any comments among the audience, we can close the session.
Yeah, thank you very much.
I just like to thank you, and then it was very good to see Mahshid and Saeid and Tehran and all the friends. And thank you. It was a good session. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Yeah, it was an honor to see our professor again. We learned a lot. It was a great lesson, you know. He didn't talk that much, but it was always very informative as always. Thank you so much for everyone and for you for moderating this. I really enjoyed it. Thank you.